And we're live. Today's Thursday, May 21st, and you're tuned into NEZ SEZ, a place where musicians can come together and inspire each other to play more guitar. Thanks for being here with us today. We have a very special show for you guys tonight. My name is Dave Nesdahl, and this is my co-host, Ty Price. Hey, Ty.
Hey, Dave. It's great to see you. Happy Thursday.
Yeah, happy Thursday indeed.
I'm very excited about tonight. I feel like I know Andy, honestly. I mean, we have a great guest. I'm very excited to introduce Andy Aledort. He's been a central contributor to the international music scene for 35 years. He's worked as a journalist, an instructor, and a performer. This is astonishing, guys. He has sold over 1 million instructional DVDs, and he continues to produce new products for Guitar World and TrueFire. And in addition to his work as a content creator, he's been a touring guitar player for the legendary Dickie Betts of the Allman Brothers. Andy also participates in the Jimi Hendrix tribute tours, sharing the stage with greats such as Paul Rogers, Buddy Guy, Hubert Sumlin, Mick Taylor, Mitch Mitchell, Billy Cox, and Robert Randolph. He's also performed and recorded many times with Double Trouble, Stevie Ray Vaughan's rhythm section of Tommy Shannon and Chris Layton. That is just dangerous. And he also performs regularly in the tri-state area with his band, the Groove Kings. They have a great studio album called Put a Stock in It, and a highly regarded live album, Live at North Star. Last year, Andy co-authored an exciting new book. This book right here. It's called Texas Blood, The Inside Story of Stevie Ray Vaughan. It was an instant New York Times bestseller. It is a book that remembers Stevie Ray by those who knew him best. I have read the book, couldn't put it down. It's absolutely fantastic. Don't take my word for it. Tommy Shannon from Double Trouble says the book, quote, by far is the best book ever written about Stevie, end quote. Now that is high praise. It is such a pleasure to welcome the talented, the great Andy Aledort to the show. Thank you, Andy, for being here.
Well, thank you both for the very kind words, and thanks for doing the show today. It's really wonderful to get together with both of you. My longtime good friend Dave Nesdahl and my new good friend Ty, and I'm so happy that you dug the book so much, Ty. I happen to have a copy right here myself, which is my last copy, because one thing that's very cool, every time I get a new shipment of books, I'll put the word out, hey, I got books if anybody needs a book. And so 3 days ago, I put the word out, and I sold 22 books in 2 days. Wow. And the book's been out since last August. So, as you may have mentioned, it became a New York Times bestseller, which is really cool. And but what's also cool is there are people who are still discovering the book today, right now, which makes me happy. And this for some would be hard to believe, but there are still people discovering Stevie Ray Vaughan for the first time. Also, of course.
Andy, what is it about his playing? And I want to get to the times where you actually sat down with him and played guitar with him. But what is it about his playing that is transferable generation to generation? I mean, what are some of those characters and qualities? Why are we still seeking guidance from Stevie Ray all these years later?
Well, I think it's because, Stevie, pardon the cliche, but he checked all the boxes for, a true guitar hero, what we attribute to all of the guitar heroes throughout the history of blues and rock music. He was an incredible performer. He had tremendous charisma. He technically was a brilliant player. I mean, he just specifically, Stevie had extraordinary technique on the guitar. Just beautiful technique and control over the instrument and the sound. It's just, it's almost surgical at times. There's a great story in the book where David Grissom, who I'm sure many people are well familiar with, one of the true guitar greats of his generation, and one of the greatest guitar players we have today.
Right.
And somebody who I'm happy to say has become a very good friend over the years. This story is in the book. Grissom tells a story about going to, I believe it was the Majestic Theater in San Antonio, to see Stevie sometime in the mid-'80s. And he had known Stevie because David moved to Austin around 1980 or something like that. And anyhow, he said that the stage in the theater was not that big, and in fact, Stevie was using 6 or 7 amplifiers, his whole crazy back line. Anyone familiar with Stevie knows that he used his 150-watt Dumble and a 412 cabinet, his 200-watt Marshall Major and a 412 cabinet, 1 or 2 super reverbs, a Vibra-Verb, and a Vibra, I think a Vibratone that was run by a Vibra-Lux. Anyway, in this particular theater, they didn't have room for everything. So they put the cabinet for the Dumble head under the stage in like a walk space. But they mic'd it so it would go through the PA. So David told me that during the show, he decided to go down and stand next to the 412 just to see what it sounded like. And he said it was about 150 decibels in this tiny space. It was beyond deafening. But being down there, all he could hear was Stevie's guitar. He couldn't hear bass, drums, nothing. All he could hear was guitar, like crushing his face. And he said he was down there for about 15 minutes, and he said he didn't hear one single thing that could even be characterized as close to some sort of a flub. Like Stevie's playing was so perfect. And then he realized not only was his playing perfect, but he said you didn't even need a band. The drive and the feeling and the heaviness of the groove, the way Stevie played, was, he said, the entire earth could have danced to the groove that Stevie was putting down by himself. And he said that in that moment, he said to himself, wow, this is like a whole other deal. When I think of what guitar playing is supposed to be, this is on another. This is just, it was an incredible revelation. So, we're still talking about him because he was a unique player. He had a distinct sound. For anyone that's heard him, he's one of those guys, it's him in one note, just because of the way he plays.
Mm-hmm.
And he also set the bar very, very high. So, he's inspiring in that way, and he probably inspires more guitar players every day, like the number of fans and people inspired by him is probably growing all the time. So,
well, one of my favorite stories in the book, that the one you just mentioned from David Grissom, and he made the point rhythmically how perfect Stevie's rhythm was, how in time he was when he was standing in front of that cabinet, which is why he didn't need to hear that. He didn't need to hear the drummer. I mean, he could follow along with the pocket Stevie was creating. Yeah,
and it made him think about, just the task, and the artistry, whatever word you want to use, dedication, what it took for Stevie to get to that place, and David thinking for himself, well, if I want to, this is something for me to aspire to. Let's put it that way. As great as David is, he was listening to that thinking, this is on another level than than the way I've been thinking about it. So.
Well, and for all you gearheads out there, and those of you in the chat that love gear, Andy included in the appendix, there's a very comprehensive, extensive list of gear that Stevie Ray was that he used, and throughout the course of the book, it's written in such a meticulous chronological way that throughout the course of the book, Alan and Andy take you on a journey through the book about how Stevie's gear evolved, throughout his career. It's absolutely fascinating, and Andy did an amazing job referencing exactly what the pedals were that he was using, even those that were modified, even naming who they were modified by. So for every Stevie gearhead out there seeking that, I mean, for many of us, it's the greatest Strat tone ever recorded.
That's for sure.
I mean, just phenomenal. They went to painstaking lengths to identify that.
Mm-hmm. Hey, real quick, before we go on any further, let's just let's notice the people in the chat real quick. Ty, you want to just say hello to everyone real quick before we forget to do that tonight?
Yeah, sure. Mike Neese is here. Hey, Mike, it's so good to see you. Chris Bevan is here. Chris, great to see you. Connor Johnson, 5150. Great to see you. Thomas Santiago, always good to see you, my friend. Kevin Cockrell is here. Football Legends. Papa Blue. Brava Sign Guy is here. Brendan B. Squared is here. Beverly Cooper Towers says, hello, guys. Great seeing you,
my mom.
Andy. Okay.
My mom. Hi, Mom.
Great seeing you, Andy. And I actually met Dave's mom this week. So, yeah, it's terrific to see you.
Well, hello, everybody.
Let's see. Brendan B. Squared says, I love Stevie Ray. My favorite song he does is the version of Mary Had a Little Lamb. Papa Blue says, I've got DVD lessons with Andy. I'm a long-time subscriber to Guitar World. Stevie Ray and Gary Moore are my absolute favorite players. Janice Lala is here. It says, hello, Andy. I remember you at the North Star in Pound Ridge.
Oh, hey, Janice. What's happening?
Johnny Bean is here. Hey, Johnny. Good to see you.
Johnny, what's up, man?
David Ennis is here. Hey, David. BB Ninja. BB, so good to see you. He's on his second read of Texas Flood. Awesome book. Everyone should read it. Nathan D is here. Says, hello, Andy.
What's up?
Hand 36 Solo, great player. He's here. Great that you've joined us as well. And people continue to roll in. Thank you all for being here.
Yeah. Also, before we start, Ty, hold up that book again. I'll hold up mine. But,
hey,
yes. But everyone in the chat, sometime in the middle of the show tonight, we'll be giving away the book that Ty's holding in his hands. And he's going to play a song, some obscure song that the first person that knows what song it is and answers it correctly will win that book. And not only will they win that book, but it'll be autographed to you, whoever wins it. The book will come to me. I'll give it to Andy. He'll sign it. He'll personalize it, and I will send it out to you. So look forward to that all.
I'm not sure how obscure it'll be.
Well, whatever. Something that's not been played on the radio.
And listen, I'll tell you guys this in the chat that are going to have a chance. One of you are going to win this book tonight. The way this book is written, the way in which Alan and Andy went about writing this book, they wrote it through the voice of those that were closest to Stevie during the time in which they were writing it. So you got very similar stories throughout the course of the book, told through slightly different lenses, which really made it a very deep analysis of what was happening at the time, with not only Stevie's playing, but how the band was developing, how the band was evolving, how the band evolved, how the band developed pre-Tommy versus post-Tommy, and then even before the Double Trouble, powerhouse that it became. Before they added Reese, after they added Reese, it's just the most comprehensive study of Stevie Ray that I've read.
Well, the way all that happened was, what I've been saying is that, Alan and I didn't purposely wait 30 years since Stevie's passing to write a book, but there were a lot of good things about having waited 30 years, or the fact that 30 years have passed, because it gave us the advantage of hindsight and perspective about Stevie, his stature, and his importance as a musician and as a guitar player, where, like anything great, it just gets better over time. And, it was never my intention to write a book, but I interviewed Stevie 4 times. First time I met him, we got to play together, which was great. And, that only happened because he was such a warm, generous guy.
He loved your guitar, didn't he?
This was before he had a chance to love my guitar, because he was playing his guitar, and I was playing my guitar. But then, in the subsequent meetings with him, he didn't have his guitar because it wasn't at a gig. The first interview was at a gig prior to the gig at the Mid-Hudson Civic Center in Poughkeepsie, December 2nd, 1986. And, it's really insane to think that was 34 years ago. It's unbelievable. But, I was writing for a magazine called Guitar for the Practicing Musician. What I would do is I'd bring my guitar and an amp whenever I'd interview someone. And I'd only been doing it for about 2 years at that point, not even like a year and a half. And I would conduct a conventional interview, and then I'd ask, whoever the guitar player was to play some things, and then I'd write it out in the magazine. So that was what was cool about the story that made it different from other magazines, was you'd get your traditional interview, but then you'd get, here's exactly how I play this, here's exactly how I play that. And the guitar players liked it a lot too. In fact, they loved it. They all loved being able to play guitar and sit and play with someone and actually be asked questions by a fellow guitar player who seemed to know something about the guitar. They were informed questions, and, and in the moments where we got to play together. I did that with Buddy Guy and B.B. King and Dean DeLeo from Stone Temple Pilots and Brian Setzer and David Hidalgo from Los Lobos and Billy Corgan from Smashing Pumpkins. There's a long, long list of people that, I did it with Rush. It's crazy when you think about it. All wonderful people, really. So Stevie came in. He had number one with him. And, we said hello. I plugged him into the amp. I plugged in. We tuned up. And then we just started to jam on this shuffle, like this blues shuffle in E, like the most typical thing. But we played for about 10 minutes and stopped. I'm taking my guitar off, and Stevie says, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I have to interview you now, Stevie." And he said, "Oh, I thought we were just going to have fun."
Yeah.
So, he was just a very warm guy. And then I, got to know Jimmy Vaughn, his brother, too, by interviewing him. And then when they did the Family Style album, I did what we think is the only interview the two of them did together, because believe me, we looked. We couldn't find any other interview anywhere, an extensive interview with them. Some of you may have seen, there's footage from Skyline Studios where they're together and they're talking about making the record, and Nile Rodgers is there, and you see them kind of goofing around.
Yep.
That was July 29th, 1990, and the next day is the day I interviewed them. But then they both, right from leaving the room with me, they both went their separate ways. And they didn't hook back up until they actually did a gig that night in St. Paul, which is interesting. They left New York to fly to St. Paul to do a gig, and then they didn't reconvene until Alpine Valley, which the second night of which is when Stevie was killed. But just to address your thing about Stevie loving my guitar, all those other times he would just sit and play my guitar. There's a great picture in the book that I took of him playing my guitar.
Yeah.
And then there's a picture of the two of us together, and he's playing my guitar in that picture too. And so that interview with him and Jimmy for the Family Style album, Stevie just sat back and played my guitar the whole time. They were actually trading it back and forth, which was neat to listen to. But most of the time, Stevie was just sitting there playing. And then when it was time to leave, he stood up and he handed me my guitar and he said, "Well, I still love your guitar." And that was one of the last things he said to me.
Wow.
So, just to put it in a nutshell, then he dies his tragic death. And so, of course, I wrote stories about, in the immediate aftermath. And those would be interviews with Chris Layton and Tommy Shannon and Reese Winans. And then Chris and Tommy did Archangels with Doyle Bramhall and Charlie Sexton. So I got together with them about that. A couple years later, they did Storyville. Got together with them about that. And then I started recording songs for an album I put out in '99 called Put a Sock in It.
Yeah.
So maybe in '97, when I just had a few songs that were finished, I sent them to Chris and Tommy. Plus, they heard the Jimi Hendrix Signature Licks book I did, where I did my best to replicate all these Hendrix tunes. And Tommy freaked out. He thought it was Hendrix. He was like, "I can't believe this isn't Jimi Hendrix." He dug it. And one of the songs on Put a Sock in It, the second song, the album is almost entirely original songs. One of the originals is a song called "I Got a Thing About You," and they liked it so much they wanted to record it with Buddy Miles.
Oh, cool.
They made a record called Bluesberries, and they were working on it, and it didn't make the record, unfortunately. But from that, they became familiar with me as a guitar player. They had known me as a writer. And so they asked me to play on their instructional videos that we did for Hot Licks, a Chris Layton drum video and a Tommy bass video. And then after that, I started to record with them and do shows with them. And anyhow, in 2000, I wrote this huge cover story to commemorate the 10th anniversary of Stevie's passing. Spent 4 days in Austin staying at Tommy's house and came home with, I think, 12 90-minute tapes. And I got home and I looked at the tapes, and I've never done this before. I said, I'm going to transcribe everything on those tapes, because if I don't do it now, I'll never do it. So it was 95 pages long. And I just had that in the files from 20 years ago. So when Alan Paul had written a book called One Way Out about the Allman Brothers, and that was a very successful book and made the New York Times bestseller list.
Great book.
Published by St. Martin's Press. So they asked him about 3 years later, they said, "You want to write another book? Your last book did well." And he said, "Yeah, I'd like to write a book about Stevie Ray Vaughan, but I want to do it with Andy because Alan had never met Stevie or interviewed him." Alan did when Jimmy Vaughan did the tribute to Stevie concert that was on Austin City Limits that many people are familiar with.
Yep.
And that came out on VHS tape, I believe. And it was with Bonnie Raitt and Buddy Guy and all these great people. Alan went to that, interviewed everybody. So that's when he first met Jimmy Vaughan. So he's known Jimmy for 26 years. And I've known Jimmy for 31 years. So, a little bit longer. But Alan had his own connections to those people,
Jimmy.
Long-standing. And so we had to submit, a proposal to try to get the book deal. So I said to Alan, "Well, I don't know how many pages they want. I'm going to send you 60 pages. So I took 60 pages from that 95-page thing, or maybe I took 40 pages or 30, 40, whatever. He added a bunch of pages of his own. But it was like altogether, our proposal was 125 pages.
Wow, that's awesome.
It was like, please give us a book deal. Here's like a third of the book is already done.
You know, it really can't be understated how important Jimmy Vaughn is in this whole story. And I thought that you and Alan just did an amazing job presenting the influence of Jimmy and the contrast of Jimmy, because they really were different players. I mean, even down to the photographs you choose to include in the book of Jimmy dressed in a suit, looking like a blues man with the haircut,
right?
And Stevie wearing the kimono. It's the modern day Hendrix. Even down to the photos you guys choose. I mean,
right.
you did such an amazing job of really telling Jimmy's story in the book as well.
Well, we both felt like it was couldn't understand Stevie if you don't understand Jimmy, and that was why getting Jimmy's participation in the book was so essential to us. But it didn't come easy. It took 2 years of convincing, even though I had already known him for almost 30 years at that point. I guess we started writing the book in 2017. It's hard to remember. The deal was in 2017, and we started at the very beginning of 2018. No, it had to be 2017. We spent 3 years writing it. So, anyway, but Jimmy finally came on board. And one thing that was very cool was before Jimmy decided that he would talk to us, he told his family members that it was okay for them to talk to us.
So that's how the family participated.
So we get a phone call from one of the cousins saying, Jimmy told me I should call you. But when Jimmy said that someone's writing a book about Stevie and he was approving of it, they all said that was like completely mind-blowing, because Jimmy he's always said, like, don't talk to that writer and have nothing, I don't want to have anything to do with, like, that's come up many times. And this was the first time he said, no, you should talk to these guys. So we got a lot of incredible family pictures that had never been published before. As you're well familiar, pictures of Stevie in his crib, and sitting on the grandmother's knee and dressed up for Halloween at 7 years old. And I mean, a lot of amazing stuff. Stevie's first gig when he's 10, or 9. No, wait, he was 10 or 11. He was born in 54. So, and then, Jimmy decided I sort of had to put his mind at ease as best I could. I guess it'd be good to say, people who know the story know this, but many people don't. There was a lot of misconceptions about the relationship between Jimmy and Stevie, and those misconceptions were that they had a rivalry, and anybody who knows anything about Dwayne and Greg Allman know the stories about their famous feuding, and and what's fun, and Johnny and Edgar Winter I became good friends with too, and so all of them say the same thing when they talk about if there's friction with their brother. I mean, these are three pretty famous pairs of brothers, but both of whom were very successful. In each case, they would say, "Do you have a brother?" Like we were talking about not getting along, they would go, "Do you have a brother?" Like,
then you understand.
Then you know what I mean.
Yeah, that's right.
Sure. Johnny Winter was telling me about Edgar, and he said, when he was 16, Johnny, and Edgar was 13, one of their early bands, Johnny and the Jammers, and they were playing clubs even though they were so young. And Johnny said, he goes, Edgar, it was amazing. Edgar played saxophone in the band. I mean, he was 13. He's like, I was 16. I wasn't even supposed to be in the bars. but I mean, he was really not supposed to be in the bars.
Mm-hmm.
But they would let us in. But he said Edgar played sax, and if the drummer didn't show up, Edgar would play drums, and if the bass player didn't show up, he'd play bass, and if the keyboard player didn't show up, he'd play keyboards, and he was like 10 times better than the guy we had anyway at 13. So I said, wow. I said, Johnny, it sounds like Edgar was just like incredibly naturally talented from such a young age. And Johnny just stares at me and he goes, no kidding. Like it was the most annoying thing that could ever be. Like Johnny Winter goes out in the world and everybody's like, Johnny Winter. And then he goes home and there's a guy in the next room who's just like so amazing.
Yeah.
But if you ask Edgar, the younger brother, he will tell you that the greatest thing that the earth, ever created, it was his brother Johnny.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And so Greg felt that way about Dwayne Allman, and Stevie certainly felt that way about Jimmy. So it was difficult to get Jimmy's story just right because it never had been told correctly. So getting Jimmy availing himself to us so I could ask him specifically what happened when this happened. And he was very candid,
Yeah, I felt I really loved the Jimmy Vaughn segments. Probably, I mean, look, the Jimmy Vaughn segment, they were so honest. Chris Layton's segments were just incredibly honest.
Mm-hmm.
And then Tommy Shannon. I mean, everybody just kind of pulled the curtain back and said, "Here's what was going on." And,
the conversations, some of them go back almost 30 years, and many of them were brand new. They took place. I mean, we had this incredible wealth of material to start with. And then we did 400 new interviews. And that's not an exaggeration.
That's a lot of interviews.
That's just amazing.
Yeah.
It's kind of ridiculous.
It's amazing.
I mean, if you look at the cast of characters in the front of the book.
I mean, I told Dave this. I said, look, you know what Alan and Andy did for me as a reader?
There's pages and pages and pages. These are just the people.
Just the people in the book.
Yeah.
Because, I was telling Dave, I was like, hey, Dave, because Dave's reading the book too. I said, did you have to constantly go back to the front?
Wasn't that fun? That's fun, right?
All right, so who is this?
Yeah, that's fun.
Yeah, what is their role in the story?
But the fact that you even included that, it's like, it's like a dictionary in the book. It's amazing.
It was great. Yeah, it was great.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and it's sort of, like getting the outline of a screenplay or something, where, all of these are the essential characters that are going to play some role in the story, but there happen to be 106 of them. We got Stevie's aunt, his mother's mother, Ann Wiley, who's 95 years old. We got comments from her, which was really amazing because Stevie's cousin Gary Wiley, and that's his mom, Ann Wiley. He said she won't talk to you on the phone, but if you give me questions, I'll ask her the questions and tell you what she says. And so we got it from her. Unfortunately, Stevie's mom had passed. His dad died in 86.
86, yeah.
And Stevie Ray Vaughan and his father died on the same day, which is kind of mind-blowing, 4 years apart. But this is another thing. The only regret is if we had started the book 5 years earlier, there was a good dozen people that were still alive that, their voices would have been powerful in the book. And people passed away. And I have to mention this, a really essential contributor to the book and one of the greatest people ever, Joe Priesnitz, who's been Eric Johnson's manager for 30 years. He just passed away, and it's the saddest thing in the world. He had, I believe, I can't remember the specific name of the cancer, but it's like a bone marrow cancer. And I had no idea that he was sick or was dealing with this for the last 3 years, because he availed himself to us. I must have interviewed Joe 6 times. And so, for anyone that doesn't know, in 1979, Joe was a booking agent, and his company was called Rock Arts. And they signed an basically unknown local guy, Stevie Ray Vaughan. And, they had some other bands that were doing well. There was a band called Greasy Wheels, and that's where Chris Layton came from. He was the drummer in Greasy Wheels. And Greasy Wheels had a record deal, and they were definitely higher up the food chain than Stevie Ray Vaughan and Double Trouble. But I asked Joe at one point if he had, like stuff in his files, press clippings or stories or things that would be useful to us for the book. And he said, yeah, I do. Let me look. I know I have them somewhere. And then one day this huge package came, like this giant box. And he said, I found the whole file from my 4 years worth of working with Stevie Ray Vaughan and Double Trouble, like everything. And he goes, and I started to go through it, and I said, screw it, I'll just send you the whole thing. Because it's more trouble to go through it, and I don't know what you want, what you don't want. So here's this whole thing. So we have pictures in the book and booking calendars and all kinds of and things erased. You see, like recording session with Boss Gags, and then it's erased, you know, because something else took its place. So we tried to include those things. It was so generous of Joe. And anyhow, there were many discussions about the book happening when it happened. And that so many things fell into place. People fell out of the sky that we were trying to find. And then all of a sudden they were calling us. A whole bunch of so many like serendipity type things happened that it was nuts. It would be like, oh my God, like this is falling in our lap. This photographer with these amazing pictures, or somebody with incredible stories. Somebody that we had read about that we didn't even know if they were alive. And then bang, there they are talking to us.
I love the way.
But wait, I just want to say, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I just want to say that. So, one of the people that was extremely helpful is a woman named Beverly Howell, who's a very good friend, and she has sort of been the right-hand man for Tom and Shannon for many years. Beverly's great. She's also very close with the family. She was very close with Stevie's mom. And so she helped a lot. And whenever I would talk to her and say, oh, Bev, I can't believe it. Like, this thing happened. And like, all of a sudden we heard they got through this guy and we heard all this. It's like, it's so great. She would say, it's because Stevie's watching over you guys. And he wants you to do it the right way. And, I'm not a big believer in that stuff. But there was some freaky stuff that made me feel like maybe it was true.
Oh, that's great. I particularly love, I've been to Austin, love 6th Street. And as a guitar player, that's guitar heaven, Mecca. You just bump into great players on 6th Street. I love the way that you guys were you guys painted a very clear vision as to where the development of Austin was at that time. And how when Stevie was doing his thing on 6, or when he was, at Antone's or the Continental Club, how different it was for him. Even though those rooms drew, Antone's and the Continental Club certainly drew their share of people. you guys were very clear in saying, Stevie Ray Vaughan helped build this music scene that was that we know today. So that when we go as tourists today, I also particularly love the fact that when the common denominator in all of the Stevie Ray Vaughan stories early on was how loud he was as a player. Just how loud he was.
True.
And it's still the same way on 6th Street, right? So, on 6th Street, they open all the windows and the doors, and you can hear, you can hear all these fantastic guitar players, competing for air. And it's pretty cool to think about that he kind of started that momentum.
Andy, by the way, how loud was Stevie at my father's place in '82?
Oh, yeah. I want to talk about that.
84. I think it was. I should look in the book. It was like August 10th. Sorry. It was like April 10th or 9th of 1984. Something like that. It was in April. Early April. That's the first time I saw Stevie Ray Vaughan. He had one album out. Texas Flood was out. And some people out there may be familiar with the original My Father's Place, legendary club in Roslyn. That's, Roslyn's about 5 minutes from here. I'm in Seacliff. And, Muddy Waters. I saw Albert King at My Father's Place. Tommy Bolin, Peter Tosh. Epi Epstein, the guy who runs My Father's Place, he had incredible people there all the time. And so that's where I saw Stevie. Stevie had one album out, Texas Flood. They had just finished recording Couldn't Stand the Weather, wasn't out yet. But they had sort of grown in popularity because Texas Flood exploded as an album. It wasn't even a year since it had come out. It came out in June of '83. So now we're in April of '84, 10 months later. And the band had all these commitments of gigs that they had to play, but they had really kind of outgrown places like that in terms of their popularity. So in a room that held 200, 250 people, they were playing like stadium level intensity. I mean, John McEnroe tells a great story in the book. And this is another thing that's super cool. I didn't know that McEnroe was at this, there was this infamous show before Stevie got signed to, no, actually he had just gotten signed to Epic. And, Texas Flood was actually a demo tape recorded at Jackson Brown's studio. So they shopped the tape, and John Hammond Sr., legendary record producer, he fell in love with it. And this is the guy who, discovered Bob Dylan, Bruce Springsteen, Charlie Christian, Aretha Franklin, like a crazy list of people. Fell in love with Stevie, wanted to put it out on his own label, and it didn't happen, but he said to Epic, you got to sign this guy. Anyway.
Can't you hear this? I think was his quote.
Yeah.
Can't you hear this?
And so, but Stevie had recorded the Let's Dance album with David Bowie and was supposed to do the tour. And he was very torn about whether he should do the tour with Bowie for a year, it's a big commitment, and leave his band on the sidelines just as his new album was coming out, or quit the tour, which people would have thought was insane. How could you quit when you're about to go on the road with David Bowie, who has the #1 album in the world? That Stevie contributed greatly to. His guitar solos on Let's Dance and China Girl.
Yeah.
So, right when Stevie was sort of like feeling all the pressure and didn't know what to do, they did this industry show at the Bottom Line, very small club in New York City. Also signed to Epic was Bryan Adams. And so the geniuses were like, oh, we'll have them both play for like industry people and MTV. And some people were like, like Bryan Adams, Stevie Ray Vaughan show is like, it's not necessarily the best, double bill.
Yeah.
The other thing was they were much hotter on Bryan Adams because he was, going to have pop songs on the radio and stuff. So they decided Bryan would be the headliner and Stevie would open. And as the opener, Stevie Ray Vaughan and Double Trouble got treated like an opener. They didn't get treated very well.
Mm-hmm.
Well, anyhow, McEnroe is somebody who we have mutual friends. He grew up in the town next to me in the 70s. The guy that was my guitar student he was John's best friend, and he would go teach John everything I just taught him.
That's cool.
Yeah, a guy named Rob Ellis. And at the time in like 1977, Rob would go, oh, look, John just bought me a new Les Paul. Or he'd go, oh, I'm going to Brazil with John. He invited me, to go to Roland Garros for the tennis tournament. And I go, hey, Rob, why don't you get out of the way and let me be John's guitar teacher so I can go to Roland Garros and I can get a new Les Paul. And I happen to love John McEnroe. He's my favorite tennis player. But I got to have this conversation with John at some point, like, remember Rob Ellis, So I found out that he was at that show. He was at the Bottom Line show. So I got him on the phone, and he tells the story. And it's like such a cool story. But it's similar to when I saw Stevie at my father's place. John said he felt like he was seeing the Police at the Orange Bowl.
Oh, wow.
Like that's how heavy it was. Seeing Stevie at the Bottom Line in front of like 100 people. Yeah. And he said when Stevie was done, the place was cinders. And he said something like, Bryan Adams is good, but it was over. When Stevie was done, like that was it. Like people were like, we're finished. And Bryan had to go out and play, and like people were just, So anyhow, when I saw Stevie at my father's place, I had 3 thoughts. And it was incredibly loud. Because Stevie already had his whole wall that early. At the beginning of 84, he had the 150 watt dumbbell and 412. He had the 200 watt major. He had 2 supers. Like he had this whole thing that were all on, if they weren't on 10, they were on 8.5. And then he had a giant plexiglass wall in front of it already, like that early. And then he would go walk in between the plexiglass and the amp so he could stand in there. He told me he liked feeling the wind blowing through his pant legs.
Oh, that's awesome.
So, but I had 3 thoughts. The thoughts were that Stevie played guitar like somebody, like eating a sandwich or something. Like it was the most natural, effortless. It was just like it seemed like nothing to him to play guitar like that. It was crazy to see somebody play like that. It was the greatest live strat tone I've ever heard, ever. It was just beyond belief. And his vibrato was among the greatest vibratos I've ever heard anyone do. It was just absolutely perfect.
Andy, you guys were very intentional in the book by saying that, or recounting stories from others that were there, of saying very, very early, Stevie and Jimmy both were hyper-focused on tone.
Well, the guy who really talked about that is Derek O'Brien, who's a legendary Texas guitar player of his own. Derek would know, but you're right. Derek pointed that out.
Doyle
Bramall.
And Doyle, yeah. That very early, tone was important to both Jimmy Jimmy and Stevie. We said in the beginning that best recorded Strat tone. You just said best live Strat tone. Let's talk about that tone and how you believe that arrived and how you believe the playing style had an effect on that tone. Somebody in the chat wants to know what I think it's some Dave dude in the chat. He wants to know what gauge strings you're using right now on your Strat.
Oh, I use straight 10s on my Strat. I hope that sounded good.
Yeah, that didn't suck.
No, not at all. That was great. So there you are, Dave, dude. Straight tens. Johnny Bean is an Antone's alumnus. So he's been on stage at South by Southwest at Antone. So we were talking about tone and how that arrives with the Stratocaster.
Well, I know Dave loves this story because he's such a Van Halen fan. Everybody knows the tone comes from your fingers. It's got to start there, And so with a plank of wood that's, solid body, you want to have a good guitar. You want to have a guitar that's resonant and makes a good sound. There are stories. There's one story in the book that Paul Schaefer tells, and there were other stories that didn't get in the book, but basically, the story was that Clapton had thrown together this very impromptu jam at Top Cat Studios in New York.
Yeah.
And I don't know what year it was. I wish I did, but it might have been 84. It was pretty early. Could have been 83, but it was pretty early. And Stevie was in the next room, and I guess they had been rehearsing because the band. I know that Chris Layton had gone back to the hotel, so he wasn't still there. It was like 3:00 in the morning or something. And so Stevie came in, he was a Clapton fanatic. That's when they first met. And the other flip side of that is it's in the book. Clapton tells the story of the first time ever hearing Stevie play. He heard, like most of us, the introduction to Stevie Ray Vaughan was through the song Let's Dance by David Bowie. Mm-hmm. And, hearing the, all those classic Albert King-isms on there. And Eric tells the story that he's in his car and it came on the radio and he pulled over. And he said to himself, I need to know who this guitar player is right now. Like not later or tomorrow. And he said the only other time that happened in his life was when he heard Duane Allman playing with Aretha Franklin on The Weight or one of those tunes.
Yeah.
And he was like, I need to know who this is now. But anyway, so Stevie came in and he had number one. And Paul Schaefer's the one who told us the story. And that's another thing, you stick around long enough, you end up at like the one degree of Kevin Bacon, right? So I had met Paul, and we have mutual friends, and so I was able to get Paul on the phone. Paul was also at the Bottom Line that night when Stevie did the bill with Bryan Adams, and he had his recollections were great too. But so Paul told me the story of Stevie coming in, and Eric had shown up without a guitar, so they had a guitar at the studio, and Eric had made it known that he hated the guitar. And so Stevie came in, hey, what's up? It's great to meet you, blah, blah, blah. And Eric's like, let's jam. And Stevie got on the phone to the hotel. He called Chris and Tom. He said, you got to get down here. We're going to jam with Eric. And I know that Steve Jordan was there and Paul, because they both weighed in. We got Steve Jordan's comments on it too. And Eric said to Stevie, I hate this guitar that they got from me. I see you have your baby with you, meaning number one. So Stevie said, well, here, play my guitar. And Paul said that, it's Clapton, but he said he could hear that Eric was not comfortable on this instrument that he'd been playing. He starts playing Stevie's guitar, and right away he's like, oh man, this is great. But Paul said, so Stevie played the guitar that Eric had been playing for an hour, and it sounded amazing.
Mm-hmm. That's a great story.
But the Van Halen connection is Stevie Ray Vaughan and Eddie Van Halen are the only two people that I'd ever say this about. I got to sit in front of them while they were playing an unamplified solid body guitar, noodling and not even thinking about playing. They're talking like the way guitar players do. They're just playing while they're talking. And the amount of sound that came off the guitar, it sounded like it was through a Marshall, on a record. Eddie Van Halen's sitting in 5150 in a chair just telling a story, playing guitar, and you can't even believe it. The level that he's playing at. He's not even paying attention. But those guys, they put in so many hours, they never stop playing. Any story about Eddie or Stevie or Hendrix, and Dickie told me, Jerry Garcia, they hung out a lot. They played a lot of shows together. He said he never saw Garcia not playing. Never. And there's famous stories of Hendrix, making eggs in the morning with his guitar on.
With the guitar.
And we have stories in the book of Stevie. I love this story that Mike Steele told when Stevie was living with Mike in 79. He said he came home one night and Stevie was sitting on the couch. This is so easy to picture. And if we make the movie, hopefully we put this in the movie. Stevie was sitting on the couch with his eyes closed and headphones on, jamming to a Band of Gypsies.
Wow.
And Mike said it was just it was the coolest thing ever. But, Stevie did that every night. He lived there for 6 months. So it's in the fingers. Stevie could make that sound probably on a stickball bat, with barbed wire on it. So it starts there. And then, I got to do a very long interview with Rene Martinez, who was Stevie's tech. Uh-huh. And we talked about everything. It was down to the screws and the capacitors and the resistors. It was pretty nuts. But, Stevie was very aware of the sound that he wanted. And so the strings, the frets, the speakers, the tubes, the power tubes, it was all about this quest for a sound, and, you can make a correlation to Van Halen too, that was one of the things that was most striking about the first Van Halen record was the sound.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Different. Yeah.
As soon as you heard it, you were like, wait a second, this
what is this?
Yeah. This is really good. So, anyway.
Well, with the sound of the guitars, would you say that it is the truth that you could hear the difference in the sound? Like you would know when he was playing number one and when he was playing any other guitar? Like the sound of that particular guitar had a very distinctive sound for a Strat?
Well, yeah. I wouldn't be right 100% of the time. But when I interviewed Stevie, when In Step came out, it wasn't even out yet. And I went to interview him. And so I had had the opportunity to listen to that record like once. So it's funny when I listen back to the interview, I'm like, what's that song? Crossfire? How'd it go? Tightrope. Songs that we all know so well now. Riviera Paradise. I heard them once. I'm be like, what's the name of that song?
Mm-hmm.
But on Tightrope, I asked him, I said, is that number one on Tightrope? And he said, yeah. And I said, that guitar has a sound, it's like a growl. And he goes, oh yeah. He goes, that guitar definitely has a unique sound. And then I asked Richard Mullen about it, who was the recording engineer on all the records.
Mm-hmm.
And Richard was phenomenal. And his comments are essential in the book.
Mm-hmm.
And he's a wonderful guy. He couldn't have been more honest about everything. And he just said to me, he goes, Stevie had a bunch of different guitars, but I always would try to get him to play number one when we were in the studio, because that was my favorite sound, was Stevie on number one.
I remember Stevie, in the book, you point out that Stevie said number one rattles. Rattles was an adjective that was used in Stevie's own description of the guitar.
His point was that at that point in 1989, he had to retire the original neck on number one.
Yeah. Because
the frets had been ripped out so many times. I mean, the neck is a 61. It's a veneer board. So if anybody knows about early 60s Strat necks, 1960s 61, this is a 61. It has a slab board, so it's a thicker piece of rosewood. It's flat on the bottom. So you can get more fret jobs out of it because there's more material there. When you pull frets out, you have to plane it down and take wood off. Mm-hmm. But a veneer board, the rosewood board is a curved piece of wood. They put the radius of the fretboard on the maple part of the neck, and then the fretboard is glued to that, and so it's thin. That's why it's called a veneer board. Yeah. You can't plane a veneer board over and over and over and over and over again. It especially down here, it becomes wafer thin. I mean, you could even plane right through it. Mm-hmm. And Stevie's guitar, I could tell you that when I saw it, the amount of rosewood that was still there versus the maple part was like a piece of paper.
Wow.
So, and that was in 86. So by 89, he said that the frets wouldn't stay in. Like no matter how many times they'd hammer them and glue them and try to get them. So he had to retire the neck. So I think, I can't remember, he may have taken the neck from Butter, which was the off-white guitar.
That's correct.
Is that what it says in the book?
Yes.
Because that was a 61 also.
Yeah.
And he put that neck on the number one body. And then Butter, I think, got the neck from the red guitar. And then at the Garden State Art Center, a few weeks before Stevie died, this piece of staging fell on number one and maybe on Butter or the red guitar. I can't remember the two guitars that got hit, and shattered both necks. But it wasn't, a lot of people thought it was the original neck on number one had gotten shattered. But it was not, because he had retired the neck. But now that neck is back on the body. So when you see the guitar, like at the Met show that they had, or in any display, that original neck is back on the body.
Yeah, and guys in the chat, for you to know, in the back of this book, where in the appendix, Alan and Andy, they go ahead and tell you when Stevie started lightening up his string gauge and what side of the pick he was using, and you know, the period that Andy's talking about, Stevie had already gone lighter on the string gauge.
On one string.
On one string, yes, he had already lightened up. He had already gotten rid of the 13.
I've been told that the next day after that staging fell on number one, that Fender Custom Shop, or the whatever, I guess it was the very beginning of the custom shop, they had made, or they had gave him two necks to put on those two guitars. So there were new necks on those guitars the next day.
It could be. I don't recall. It might be in my interview with Renee. But there's something about that sounds familiar. Somewhere in there was when Fender showed up with the Stevie guitar.
Yeah, they were just about to do a run of Steve Ray Vaughan not replicas, but tribute guitars. And when the scaffolding or whatever it was that fell on those guitars, they actually had a neck. They had a neck to give him to put on that guitar. So,
but was that when? See, I can't even remember, and I wrote the book. He was on the Tonight Show, and they had to replace the pickguard too.
Yes, same.
And so they looked for letters, SRV letters, and the only letters they could find were the ones that were the design that now are etched into the pickguard.
Yep. Correct. Yeah, that was on Letterman. Yeah. That was they found those stick-on letters in the office of the Letterman show, but also on that guitar that night was a brand new Fender custom shop neck. So,
and you know, some people ask, and I asked Stevie this. Number one famously had the tremolo bar, flipped over, coming from this side like Hendrix.
Lefty.
Yes. And because this piece is normally here, the little extra piece, when it's over here, there's a hole here. And so Stevie had to get a piece of wood, grafted in there to fill the space. And so, I asked Stevie what the story was with that, and he said that he had broken his tremolo arm and they couldn't get the piece out of the block, and he was somewhere and they only had a lefty tremolo, which is pretty odd, right? Like a vintage Strat tremolo, but it was a lefty one. It was so weird. And so he said, yeah, put that in. So they had to go to the trouble of routing out, changing the routing back there to accommodate a lefty tremolo system. And I asked him if he liked it better, and he said that he did, but not so much so. Like I said, well, are any of your other guitars have lefty tremolos? He said no.
So not enough to do it all the way around.
Exactly. It wasn't like, oh, I really want to have a lefty tremolo.
So Andy, if there's a guy watching, the guy in the chat, and they want to start, and they say, I don't have Stevie's hands, but if I were going to start somewhere with this tone, I'm obviously going to start with a Strat. I'm going to start with some single coils, and where do I go from there? What kind of advice do you give that person?
Well, I mean, Stevie liked Fenders, and he said to me that, when he said, when my Dumbles are working correctly, they just sound like giant Fenders.
And Andy, is his introduction to the Dumble with the Jackson Browne Texas Flood sessions? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, because somebody said when they got there, oh, you should check this amp out. We call it Mother Dumble. It's Jackson's amp. And Stevie plugged into it, and everybody was like, wow, this sounds really good. And Richard Mullen, who, as I said, deserves a lot of credit, Richard said, well, we're going to use one amp, and we're using that amp, and we're using one mic. Another Eddie Van Halen, shared thing.
Yep.
because Eddie liked one mic on one speaker, and that's when I went to his studio. That's the way it was. Looked like it hadn't been moved in 30 years. You know? So that was Stevie's introduction to dumbbell amplifiers, and a lot of people think that's the best tone he ever got, is on Texas Flood, which is so crazy because they recorded the whole album in 2 days. It was like a demo.
Yeah.
And there's even a story in the book that Richard tells where Lincoln Clapp, who was a mastering engineer, when they went to master Texas Flood, Lincoln said to Richard, "I can't believe what a consistent sound you got across all these tracks." And Richard started laughing, and he goes, "Well, that's because there wasn't any time to turn any of the knobs."
That's right.
Yeah.
You know, like we recorded, they did, the first day there was, you know, like Richard wasn't allowed to get behind the board, and there was some politics, and, you know, like things weren't going well. And it was Thanksgiving weekend. Nobody wanted to be there other than them. They just showed up unannounced. I mean, it's sort of crazy, really, how that album even got recorded. And so I don't even think they got anything that first night. They might have got one song. But then the next day, Richard was finally given the go-ahead, and he completely rearranged everything, got sounds. Yeah. But, I mean, they just played live. They put a couple gobos. They set up in the room together, looking at each other like a gig.
With some baffles. Yeah.
With some baffles. Yeah. Richard wouldn't let them wear headphones.
Yep, I read that. Yep.
And Stevie redid his vocals later. So the vocals on the record were not done live, but pretty much everything else is just live. And they did like 8 songs the next day. And then the third day they did 2 songs.
Yeah, I remember the story in the book where they told them that they were going to release what they did at Jackson Brown's, and Leighton was like, "You mean the demo? you're going to release the demo?"
Well, that was part of the John Hammond thing.
Yeah.
You know, they sent it to him to get the deal, and he went, "It's great.
Yeah.
Like, this is the record."
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing.
That's great.
How often has that ever been done?
Well, you know, actually, given the opportunity to make a new record because you got a record deal with a major label, that probably never had been done. The only thing that's similar, and it's interesting because it also involves Tommy Shannon, is that Tommy Shannon, when he was playing with Johnny Winter in 1968, they made a demo tape at a famous club called the Vulcan Gas Company in Austin. And it was intended as a demo tape to try to get a record deal. And so Johnny signed his big deal with Columbia, went to the studio, and they released Johnny Winter, the first album. But Liberty Records said, "Well, you know, we have this tape. We're going to release this at the same time." And it caused a lot of confusion because people didn't know what was Johnny's first album. But the album that's known as Progressive Blues Experiment wasn't an album. It was a demo tape to try to get a record deal. Mm-hmm. And that's the only other time I could think of something like that happening. And both of them involved Tommy Shannon, which is sort of funny. But Johnny Winter loved Progressive Blues Experiment. Like, he thought they played great. He was like, it was exactly the way we sounded. And so Chris Leighton echoes those sentiments when he talked about Texas Flood. He said, "You'll never hear a more honest record than Texas Flood, because it was just us playing the way we played every night."
Wow. Very cool. Very cool. So what do you say we give away a book?
That means I have to play something?
You have to play something. And
all right, so shouldn't you tell the audience what the parameters of the deal is?
Okay, so the parameters are you have to be a subscriber to my channel, first of all.
Oh, forget that. I'm out.
You have to dig in your pockets and send some cash to my PayPal and my Venmo. No, I'm just kidding. But no, seriously, it's not mandatory. But if you feel like sending some money to help the channel so that we can keep doing these shows, any bit helps, and it's all appreciated. PayPal or Venmo at dnrwb5150@aol.com. Again, it's not mandatory, but if you feel like it, you can send some love our way that way. Andy's going to play a song.
I'm just going to play a little
part. He's gonna play part of a song. First person that guesses what the song is gets the book. Now the book is going to come to me. I'm going to give it to Andy, and he'll personalize it and autograph it for you.
Yeah.
And then I'll send it out to you. The person that wins it will have to figure out how to contact me so I can get your information.
They can contact you on Facebook Messenger.
Facebook Messenger, yes, that's David Nesdahl at Facebook Messenger. And if you don't have Facebook, because some people don't have Facebook, we'll figure out a way. I'll just give you my email address right there on my PayPal. That is my email address. Email me your name and address, and I'll get the book out to you.
And this is the actual book right here.
That's it.
All right, so I'm going to attempt to play this song. All right?
Yep.
Or this little piece of a song. All right, here we go. What happened to my... One more time. All right.
Well, anyway,
like that.
So Mike Neese said it first, but I don't know if that's the actual name of the song. He says "Soul to Soul," and then Ed Dana says "Say What."
Well, the song's called "Say What."
Okay, so unfortunately, Mike Neese, that is the right song, but wrong title. So Ed Dana wins the book.
I'm sorry my wah-wah didn't go on at first. But it came on later.
Congratulations, Ed. This is going to be on its way to you.
Mike Neese, I'm so sorry. You almost had it there, bud. Right song, wrong title.
Ed, I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. I loved it.
So Ed, yeah, contact me on my email address, which is right there in the in our little thing here on the bottom, dnrwb5150@aol.com. Put your full name and your address on it, and as soon as I get the book back in my hands from Andy, I will send it out to you. Congratulations.
All right.
Now, Andy, you're a big fan of Jimmy
Hendrix?
Hendrix.
Hempstead.
Jimi. And so are we. So let's talk about Jimmy. Let's talk about. I mean, you are an incredible player with a deep knowledge about what you're doing and how you're doing it.
Well, thank you. I'm trying to learn.
Obviously, very influenced by Hendrix. Stevie was influenced by Hendrix. I have this right here, boys and girls. You can get this from Andy's website. This is my Hendrix. All of us have our own Hendrix record.
Actually, I have to correct you. You can't get it from my website anymore, because for whatever reason, the Guitar World DVDs that I did, and that's one of them, are now really hard to find.
So this is a collector's item, boys and girls.
Kind of. I think you might be able to get it from Alfred Publishing.
Okay.
Unless you just get one on eBay. But they're not like it was 10 years ago,
Okay.
when they were still being produced and really readily available. They're just not. Some people are like, a DVD, what's that,
Well, this is I couldn't put my hands on Electric Ladyland. I know that's around here somewhere, but this is my Hendrix record. Axis, Oldest Love is my record, and I love it. And Andy does a great job of presenting this material for mere mortals. And so how does Hendrix fit into who you are as a player, Andy?
Oh God. Well, Hendrix is my favorite musician of all. And so, it's one of those things where, thank God we don't have to pick. But if I did have to pick, it would be Hendrix. Just everything about him, his music and his guitar playing, and it just, as powerful as other musicians have been in their music to me, just nobody like him. So he was the reason when I finally got really serious about the guitar, because I started playing guitar when I was 11, but I was much more into art, and I ended up going to school for art, college for art, and got a degree in art. Mm-hmm. But sort of simultaneous to right when I started going to college, when I was 16 years old, turning 17, I started to play guitar for like 6 or 7 hours a day. Like something happened, like a switch went off. But Hendrix was like the fuel to the fire for me. And my first band in 1974, when I was 18, we played like 30 Hendrix songs. We played all kinds of weird Hendrix. Like if you play 30 Hendrix songs, then you're playing songs people don't know.
Right.
You're not just playing Foxy Lady and Purple Haze. We played Third Stone from the Sun. That was ambitious. And, Stevie would play it, but he would only play the end part and the main melody. We would do the whole intro and the whole beginning and all the talking and everything. So along with the big hits and Manic Depression and I Don't Live Today, we would play Look Over Yonder and Hey Baby. We'd play Three Little Bears, Catastrophe, Nightbird Flying, Easy Rider. If Hendrix put it out, we tried to play it. Jam Back at the House, also known as Beginnings, Midnight. We played every song we could try to play. So, to this day, Hendrix is my favorite musician, and just brilliant. They put out recently that I forget what it's called. It has the worst name. It's called Songs for Groovy Children. but it's the complete all 4 shows from Band of Gypsies. December 31st, 1969, early and late show, and January 1st, 1970, early and late show. And the audio quality is very good. and it's just Jimmy's playing. It's just so phenomenal. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's just ridiculous. And he never plays the same thing. And I mean, Uncle John Turner, who played drums with Johnny Winter, told me that in 1968 they went to see the Jimi Hendrix Experience in Dallas, and they weren't signed yet. You know, the trio, Johnny Winter with Tommy Shannon on bass and Uncle John Turner on drums. And I have a bootleg of that show here somewhere because I have hundreds of Hendrix bootlegs. Dave could attest to that.
Yep, I've been there.
And Unc told me that Johnny spent the whole show with his head in his hands, saying it's impossible. Nobody could play guitar that good. Like, it can't be done. And that's Johnny Winter, you know. Like, so yeah, Jimmy is my guy.
Yeah.
You could say
Let me ask you something from an instructional standpoint. So if there's a young player, he's young in the craft and he wants to venture into Hendrix, would your advice, in your opinion, where should he start? Should he start as a cage bass player? Should he someone of your experience, where would you recommend that player begin?
Well, I mean, to be honest, you know, I think, 1 second. You know, I think they should just start with the songs that they like. I mean, you know, some of the songs might be too challenging to play, but, oh, I did a tremolo arm thing, so my guitar is definitely not in tune.
You want to borrow this one?
Sure. Close enough. Like one of the first songs I learned, you know.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. Hey,
Yeah.
Joe. Hey, Joe's a good...
I'm going to throw this thing away right now.
Stop it. I love that. So, Stevie would do that on his version of Voodoo Child, but he stole that from a live version of Hey Joe. I know that he did. Because it's the one that was on the Concerts album. And, you know, Hendrix would go... You know, he would always throw that in there. You know, Jimmy liked to play... Sorry, fellas. You know, so, Hey Joe is a great place to start. You know, Foxy Lady is a great place to start. a lot of the songs on the first record are great to play. You know, the one that starts. You have to go like. Let's see. Hold on a second.
Waterfall?
That's a great one to play.
Beautiful.
I lost my slide. And like I was mentioning, when we played Third Stone from the Sun, like we would play, from the top, like.
Wait.
Guitar is not in tune enough. Well, anyway, so my suggestion would be, start with all those songs, but they should, they should play if a song is seems particularly challenging. That's good too. Voodoo Child is not a bad song to start with. Even Red House is not a bad song. My Band-Aid, I have to say, is
Andy, what are you playing through? What type of amp are you playing through?
I'm going to lose my Band-Aid, but my finger might rip open. All right, well, we were talking about tone before, and so the amp I'm playing through right now, it's a 72 Bandmaster chassis that was put into a deluxe style 112 combo enclosure.
Nice.
2 summers ago, I had the opportunity to buy a 72 Silverface Bandmaster, which was my amp, my primary gigging amp back in the 70s, was a 72 Bandmaster. So I always loved that amp, 40-watt amp, sounded great. And then this one came along, and it was funny. The guy said, "I'll sell it to you for $250," which is like ridiculously low price.
Wow.
Because he could have gotten $800 for the amp, but then he would have had to ship it, and he didn't want to deal with somebody saying, "Oh, I don't like it, I want my money back." And like he said, "You come over here with $250 in cash, you can leave with it." But he made me take other amps that were broken.
Oh.
Because he's like, they were all in his parents' basement, and they were clearing out the house. Anyway, as soon as I got it, what I wanted to do was pull the chassis, put it in a deluxe style 112 combo. And so Peter Mather from Mather Cabinet Company made me the box. And it's perfect, beautiful. His work is great. And then I talked to Mitch Colby about the idea. Mitch is a longtime friend from Colby Amps and Park Amps and Sun Dragon Amps. Mm-hmm. And my favorite 12-inch speaker is a Celestion G1265 because I have a 1978 or 9 JMP combo.
My
Marshall
favorite amp
50
you
watt
have.
combo. A really good amp. And those are the speakers in that amp. So Mitch said to me, well, you could do it, but the problem is that the transformer in the Silverface Bandmaster is a 4-ohm transformer intended to be used with, a pair of 12s or a bigger, multi-speaker situation. So he said, let's do this. Let's swap out the transformer. We'll take the 40-watt 4-ohm Bandmaster transformer out. We'll put in a 50-watt Bassman transformer that's switchable 4-ohm or 8-ohm. So I said, okay. So he did that, and it's set to 8-ohm now because it's running the one 8-ohm speaker. But if I plug in an extension cabinet, and I have a 212 extension cabinet, like a typical Fender Bassman style 212 cabinet, that would be at 4 ohms. So I could do that as well. And so what I'm playing through now is that this one speaker amp, but I have some boxes on. So if I turn the boxes off, let's turn those off. The amp's only on I don't know. It's on 3 right now.
That's actually louder than it is with the boxes.
I know. And then now it's on 3 1/4.
That might very well be the best 112 sounding amp I've ever heard.
That sounds amazing. That's Andy Aledort, ladies and gentlemen.
It's on 3 1/4.
That's great.
Why don't you ask people if they know what song that is?
I hadn't seen it yet. Our good friend William Errol DeBose, USAF retired. Thank you for your service, sir. Says he loves the 6970 New Year's Fillmore East performance of Machine Gun. Feels like it's Jimmy's Everest.
Well, that's, a lot of people would share that sentiment, you kind of can't top Machine Gun.
Andy, before you go further, Johnny Bean wants to know what that song was that you just played. He wanted to know the answer because no one seems to be answering.
Oh, come on, guys. Somebody's got to know. I'll do it again.
My niece is not cast made of sand. Hugh Caldwell says, "Hey, baby."
He's correct.
Yeah.
I mean, we would play that,
Good job, Hugh.
We would play, song that is.
I was just checking my email to make sure YouTube isn't dinging us really bad for all these copyright infringements.
Nah, they won't. They won't. But that's Look Over Yonder. So
There it is. Hugh Caldwell said, "Look over yonder."
Look over yonder.
7/8. My buddy Jay says, "Sounds killer." Jay's one of the co-hosts on the Johnny Bean Show with me and Johnny.
I mean, so we were talking about tone. So to me, you gotta have a good amp. I mean, it's all a matter of taste. I like a Fender amp and the Fender sound. So you heard what it sounded like with no boxes.
Yep.
And it was a really nice sound. So I have a way huge overrated special, and my ancient DOD yellow overdrive preamp 250 is sort
How
of
about that, Dave?
Yeah.
giving a little bit of beef.
Nice.
I like that sound.
Yeah. So Ty, you can send me one of those DODs as well with the Ty is thinking about selling me one of his Clyde McCoy original like mid-60s Clyde McCoys. So he could send that DOD with it.
I told you you'd like the DOD with single coils.
Well, I knew Andy was using that, but it's very funny that you mentioned it to me today.
I think that was $30. That pedal, I think.
Yeah.
The first distortion pedal I ever bought.
It's fantastic.
Yeah,
in the right setup, it's fantastic.
It's awesome.
It's the only pedal that Yngwie uses.
That's correct.
Well, fellas, we've been going for an hour 45.
Yes.
So, can we pull it to a close? What do you think?
Yeah. Well, if you want to leave, that's fine. We usually stay till 10, but if you got to go, we totally understand.
No, let's get a couple more things in. I'm happy to do that.
Okay, awesome. I really appreciate that.
I mean, I don't know if any people out there have questions or any other questions you guys have. I played with Dickie Betts for 12 years.
Yes.
I don't know. We could talk about slide guitar if I could find my slide.
I'd also like you to maybe show off your Les Paul and your 335, if you have a moment to do that, if they're around.
Oh, they're around. They're always around, Dave. You know that.
Yeah, I think people would love to hear the story about the Les Paul and the great story behind the 335. How you got that?
Un momento.
Surely.
The Les Paul is right here. And the deal with this guitar is, you guys can hear me, right?
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
When Dickie Betts hired me to play with him, it was totally out of the blue, because his guitar player Dan Toller had quit about 5 days. Oh, my son is calling me. About 5 days before the tour. Let me just text my son. We're live right now, right?
Yes, we are.
What are we on? Like, if I tell him where to go?
The David Nesdahl YouTube channel.
1 second.
And if you haven't subscribed to the David Nesdahl YouTube channel, you should subscribe and then hit that bell so that you could be, so you can get this ahead of time. You'll know that guys like Andy Aledort or Johnny Highland or any of our guests, you'll know about it ahead of time and you'll be able to tune in.
That's right. So So it was, it was a real moment's notice thing. When I got the gig with Betts, and I didn't have a Les Paul, and so when we went to go out this next year in 2006, I really felt like Dickie's music warranted a pair of Les Pauls.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's what I always, that was the sound that I had in my head of Dwayne and Dickie together and two Les Pauls. So I contacted the custom shop at the time. Steve Christmas was there, and they at the time there were only two Les Pauls that you could get from the custom shop: a 58 or a 59. And the 58 had a very big neck, and the 59 had kind of a slim neck. And pain in the ass that I am, I said, is there any way it could be like in between? Like not quite as beefed out as the 58, but fatter than the 59, leaning closer to the 58. And Steve said, absolutely. So they made what they call a 30/60 neck. And that's what this is. And Dave was one of the first people to play the guitar. He was the first person to play this guitar besides me.
Yeah.
And I just got a plain top with burst buckers. Hold on. My bridge pickup was off. And it's just a great guitar. It weighs 9 pounds, so it's some people might think that's a little bit heavy. We like.
I think it's right in the money. It's kind of right on the money.
Sounds fantastic.
A lot of real 58s and 59s were in the 9-pound range. That's really good.
Yeah, it feels great. And then one of the reasons Dickie hired me was to play slide. And so, when it comes to slide guitar,
that sounds awesome.
It's great. Love this guitar. You want to see the 335?
Yeah.
Please.
All right, hold on. That I have to go get.
So, should I continue the story while you get that about when you first got the guitar and you didn't really like it?
Oh, I didn't like it. I called Dave. I went, okay, my Les Paul's here. I don't like it. Like, what am I going to do? And Dave came over and he played it and he went, you're crazy.
That's exactly what I said. I said, that's what these things are. That's a great guitar. You need to rethink this. And he loves it now. At least I think he does. He still has it. Now we're talking. Now we're talking my speed.
What did I miss?
Ooh, I love that.
I said that. I said now we're talking my speed.
No, I meant I was gone. I couldn't.
Oh, all I said was I said that's that's the way those things are. Those Les Pauls. That's an amazing guitar. I said you need to rethink that a little bit.
Well, I mean, whatever it was, I guess I had it so built up in my mind, like what it was going to be, and it wasn't what I had in my mind, whatever that was. And just because people were asking about string gauges, I use 10.5s on the Gibsons, so it's like an 11 set, except the high E, instead of it being 11, is a 10.5, and the B, instead of being a 14, is a 13.5. But then it goes 18, 28, 38, 48, or 49, depending on the set.
Yeah, that's right in there. That's a really good gauge. Nice. I love the sound of a 335.
Oh man, the 335 is amazing. Sylvester,
hold on my finger.
Sylvester
Ouch.
Otto 1 says that he stopped at the Big House in Macon, Georgia last year. He really loved it, which leads me to a question, Andy. In the photo that we used in promotion for this YouTube event tonight, we featured you holding a very, very special Les Paul. Can you tell us the story about that?
Oh, sure. So the Big House in Macon, Georgia, is where the Allman Brothers lived together. Yep. When they all first moved there in 1969. And it's been turned into a museum, and some really wonderful people. One guy named Cliff Greenberg has raised a tremendous amount of money to make the Big House what it is. If you're ever in Macon, Georgia, you got to go. It's a beautiful place. And they have amps and guitars and ticket stubs and flyers and posters and albums, and then the rooms have been done to recreate the way they looked. Barry Oakley's wife, did all kinds of things. So that picture is one of the rooms, and it's been recreated as closely as possible to everybody's memory of what it looked like in 1969. But the guy who runs the Big House is a guy named Richard Brandt, who's a wonderful person. And so I was down there playing with Dickie, and Richard said, "Hey, you got to come over. You got to play Dwayne's Layla Gold Top."
Amazing.
And I said, "Okay." So there's video of me playing it that Richard shot with my phone, and it's very funny because I'm playing. They got a little 50-watt Marshall head and a 212 cabinet for me to play through. It sounded really nice. It was like a vintage. I don't know if it was a Plexi, but it was a really nice sounding little rig. And now, if anybody knows anything about that guitar went through hell, and so it's refinished.
Okay.
It's not the original gold top, and I think the neck was broken, so it's been repaired. And I mean, there's a lot of that guitar was completely trashed.
Wow.
So to bring it back to a playable instrument, they had to do a lot. But it's the guitar.
Mm-hmm.
Sweet.
I mean, it's the one that the picture of Dwayne sleeping with it. It's the Layla guitar. What can you say? You know,
What can
it's
you
so
say?
That's
nuts,
cool.
and it sounds amazing. And when I was playing slide on it, I was using a slide that had belonged to Dwayne, so that was kind of mind blowing too.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's very cool.
I've had the good fortune to play some famous guitars. That's one of them. I played Hendrix's White Woodstock Strat
Wow.
because it was brought to the Beacon on one of the Hendrix tribute tours for Eric Johnson to play. So I got to play it.
Cool.
And I played Hendrix's V from the Isla White V. And the strings on it were ancient, and there were 3 strings, and they were completely rusty. So they might have been the original strings.
Oh
That's
wow.
insane.
Is that the V you write about in the book where Stevie was mistaken about whether that was going to be a gift or a?
I think it's the same guitar.
Yep.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not the painted V. The painted V is from earlier and has like the bigger pickguard. This is the V that they made for Jimmy, and actually it's one of the few real true lefty guitars that he had, in the sense of the knobs are, on the correct side for a lefty.
Mm-hmm.
And it has what's known as the Trini Lopez split diamond inlays, which also make it unusual.
Yeah.
The neck on that guitar, I can tell you, is huge. Huge neck. Jimmy obviously loved the guitar. He played it a lot.
That's incredible.
Yeah,
It's probably the guitar on Dolly Dagger. Hendrix is another guy, like you're talking about, if I could tell if it's number 1 on the Stevie recordings. The other guitar of Stevie's with a very distinctive sound was the Charlie Wirtz guitar with the lipstick pickups.
Oh yeah.
That's on Tin Pan Alley, and you can tell when it's that guitar.
It's very bright.
It's very bright and very clean.
Yeah.
But Tightrope, Riviera Paradise, those are number 1. But I believe Dolly Dagger is the V.
Mm-hmm. That's cool. Yeah, it sounds like a humbucker. So yeah.
Kind of does, yeah.
Yeah. Real quick before we leave, why don't you show everyone the mods that were done to that guitar to make it different than most 335s?
Oh, this guitar.
Yes.
All right. Well, it's very little. Although what I should explain really quickly while we have the time is that, so before I ever met Dickie, I had become friends with Warren Haynes. I met Warren in 1990, and it's funny. A few years later, I said, "Oh, Warren, it'd be great to play together. I'd love you to hear me play." And he said, "Oh, I've heard you're playing." And I was thinking, like, how? And he said, "Oh, in the late 80s, somebody gave me a cassette tape of you, which was from like a basement jam or a gig or something." And he remembered it.
Wow.
He was like, "Yeah, I loved it." I was
That's
like,
insane.
What? Like, what? I didn't even know what he heard, to tell you the truth. But, so I was at his house, and he had a 61 335 that he bought because he fell in love with Dickie's 61 335. So I was like, well, I don't want to be left out in the cold. I want a 61 335 too. But I couldn't afford a real one. Warren bought his in like 1990. So, I think he paid $5,000 or something for an original. But by the time we get to 2005, they're not going to be $5,000, for a real 1960 61. But I wanted it just like that. So I said to the custom shop, this was in 2008, or before the tour of 2008. So during 2007, I said I want it to be just like a 61 dot board, but with the routing inside, because that's when toward the end of 60, before that, the center block, like in a 58 335, like Larry Carlton guitar, is a solid, like a 2x4. But if it was a 345 or 55, they did additional routing in the center block for the very tone and the additional wiring. And then in the middle of 60, they decided, let's just route all the center blocks, whether it's going to be a 335, 45, 55, it'll be easier. But what that resulted in was a more resonant guitar because there's less wood inside, and there's like almost like a sound chamber in that channel underneath the pickups that was all the wood routed out. So I knew I wanted it made like that, even though it was a 335. So they did that for me. And then what's affectionately known as the Dickie Betts mod is these two things are swapped, because normally the neck volume is here and the toggle switch is here. But Dickie on his swapped the positions because he likes to do volume swells. Now I have a noisy pot right now, so it makes noise, but like you can reach it, so you could do it. When it was down there, forget
Can't
it.
reach it. Yeah.
You know, impossible. But what Dickie didn't have done, and I did have done, and it's interesting, there's only one other guy that ever asked for this. I can't stand that the jack for the guitar is like over here, like on the face of the guitar. Because not only is it ugly, but if you step on your cable, it'll rip the jack out of the, and now your guitar is ruined. So I said, can't you put the jack on the butt of the guitar? And they said, well, it's kind of a pain in the ass because of the wiring harness and the way it works, but we'll do it for you. So I like it much better because, you know.
Difference.
Yeah.
That's the difference.
Yeah. And although on some of them, Dave, the jack is actually higher up. That looks pretty low.
Yeah, it's, well, you know, I mean, this is a 63.
Right.
So it could be different on different guitars, but that's where it is.
Some of them it's a little higher. But then they said to me, well, there's only one other person that ever asked for the jack to be on the butt of the guitar. And I said, who's that? And they said, B.B. King.
Wow.
So the BB model is the only 335 type guitar where that's where the jack is.
It
That's
really
good
makes
company.
sense to have it there. It
Well,
makes
yeah, I mean, come on. Like, who wants to see it any other way?
It's good company. Hey, Andy, we have a question in the chat from our good friend in Switzerland, BB Ninja. He said, would you ever consider doing a Hendrix book?
Oh, well, you know what? The answer would be no. For a few reasons. I mean, I've done a tremendous number of Hendrix instructional books, as you all know. But the real reason is because there are so many Hendrix books. You know, I mean, I don't know how many there are, but there are a lot. And that was actually one of the reasons to write the Stevie book, is because there weren't any that were good. No offense to the writers of the other books. But there was no real definitive biography of Stevie. The one that had come out in 92, right after he died, was called Caught in the Crossfire by Nick Petoskey.
Yep.
And Bob, his name's escaping me right now. And, you know, barely anyone participated in the writing of that book. I think his Uncle Joe Cook participated, but Chris, Tommy, Jimmy, no one else. And there were a lot of inaccuracies in that book. And Nick Petoskey took a lot of liberties in sort of recreating conversations that there's no way that he would have known how they went down. So there was a lot of writer embellishment in that book that, personally, when I read the book, I didn't really like that. So, you know, it's not that it's a bad book. The book is fine.
I have it.
But it wasn't as informed because not enough people were involved in the writing of the book. And then Craig Hopkins put out these books that are big, but they're like sort of fan type books where there's a lot of detail, but they're not written like biographies, and they don't really go into Stevie's personality, and they're nothing like the book that we wrote. So anyway, that was
nothing's like the book you wrote.
No,
I mean,
this is incredible.
Well, it
nothing
was a
is
big
like
part of
the book you read.
the compulsion to write the book was that Stevie deserved a really good biography. I mean, that was really where it came from. That one didn't exist, so he deserved as good a biography as we could possibly write. We were going to do our best.
I
Well,
honestly, other than being, and besides being friends with you, I think this is probably one of the best and most well-written books ever. I mean, any musician or rock hero book. I mean, I think this is incredibly written, and I mean, you can't get any closer than this.
Well, the level of detail that's contained within is just when you think you know it all, you read something like this and you're like, nah, there's a lot of murky water that gets
Well,
cleared up.
we had fun with it too in that way because believe me, there were a million stories that we heard. They were all great, and Alan, my co-writer, was freaking out at one point because he was like, we have way too much stuff. Like, they're not going to let us put out a 400, 500 page book. I mean, it was just growing and growing and growing. And I said, well, you know what, Alan, the thing is that the closer we get to being done, we'll know what deserves to stay and what has to go. And then we kind of adapted a mantra at a certain point, which was that we can never lose Stevie. Like, Stevie's presence has to be felt on every page. And so you start to... we started to get a feeling for that thing. The more, I mean, the work that we did together, like we'd be on the phone for 10 hours a day, arguing about stuff. But eventually, we both had a picture in our mind of pretty much the entire book from beginning to end, like almost every page. And it's a lot of puzzle pieces, especially in oral history style. So, but what we wanted to do, first and foremost, along with telling Stevie's story personally and professionally and giving you a feeling for Stevie as a person, was for the book to have momentum and for the story to have momentum. Like you always talk about the trajectory, the arc of the story.
The arc, yeah.
But we wanted the book to move along.
Yeah.
Like, you got to feel like that ball is moving down the field all the time. And we were very aware of that. And it helped us. Because then we started to realize the book is better if we lose, like, this whole page that we have in there now. Because we're going to get from here to here faster.
I've got to ask. You knew a lot of this that was going into the book before it was committed to paper. Any surprises to you? When you were putting this together, any big surprises for you?
Yeah, it's funny. That's a question that was asked, that has been asked in all the the book tours that we did. So it was funny because there were two of us.
I mean, you played with two of the guys that were on the front row of this. I mean, you interviewed Stevie 4 times. You played with him. I mean, it's. What surprised you?
Well, it's funny. So, Alan and I, because we had to think about it, and then we were doing it together. So we'd sort of like one of us would take, the one perspective. I mean, this happened naturally, but then it became a thing we could rely on when we were asked this question. The thing that surprised me, I knew Stevie had substance abuse problems and that they were serious. And Stevie told me that himself. But when people like Chris Layton and Tommy Shannon and Mike Steele, who is a very good friend of Stevie's, a guy who I mentioned before, who Stevie lived with, when they told me what it was really like, Stevie being up for 4 days in a row, shooting speed, and then finally just like crashing out, like, a speed crash, you know, sitting behind the wheel of
Of a van.
the
Yeah.
van,
Yeah.
you know, and it's stalling out, and him just being a disaster. Like every part of his personal life was a disaster. He really was someone who lived to play, and so, not unlike Charlie Parker, the great jazz saxophone player, when Stevie was on stage, the world was perfect. But the second he stepped off the stage, the world was a disaster. His personal life was a disaster. His relationships,
Finances.
his drug problems, his finances, everything was a shambles because of the way he was living his life. So that was shocking to me, the extent to which how much of that was the depth of the problem.
Mm-hmm.
But it helps. But we did feel like we don't want the book to be salacious, but you won't appreciate how important it was when Stevie got sober if you don't understand how bad it was.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You won't appreciate the fact that this is someone who did something that millions of people can't do and try over and over and over and over again, which is to get sober, because it's hard to do. And that also became a big part of the story of the book, because so many people found inspiration from Stevie's story and his life to become sober and to address the problems in their life, not just necessarily drug and alcohol problems.
Yeah.
Because Stevie said to me, he goes, you know, I thought when I got sober, you know, my problems would be gone because I got rid of the drugs and the alcohol. Because that's when I realized I was just discovering all the problems.
Mm-hmm.
the underlying things that were the reason why I became a drug addict.
Mm-hmm.
Now I had to deal with something called emotion,
Right.
and feelings and fears and life. And he goes, so the whole drug and alcohol thing became like, that was like almost insignificant.
Mm-hmm.
Now I was faced with real life and me. Like, who am I? This is heavy, heavy stuff. And he was very eloquent talking about it. And so there are people who came up to us, you know, that are 30 years old that say, I got sober because of Stevie Ray Vaughan 2 years ago.
That's amazing.
28 years after he died.
Tremendous.
And Chris and Tommy would tell you that if Stevie knew that, that would make him happier than anything.
Mm.
That he was helping people to live happier lives. Not just they like my guitar playing.
Yep.
You know, and they thought this was a good record. Or even that they were inspired by my guitar playing to, you know, in their music, which is all great. To actually impact someone's life so you think about the way you live your life, I mean, that is, there's nothing bigger than that. And so that would be Alan's answer to what was the thing that surprised you the most. So what I said was the depth of his drug problem, and Alan's answer was the breadth of his sobriety.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So they,
well,
you know,
kudos to you
that's
both.
the whole. That's the two pieces.
Yeah, I have one last question, and then I think we're gonna call it a night. You said that Stevie was in a perfect world when he was on stage. Would you agree with me in saying maybe the one time that was not the case was when he did the Star Spangled Banner at the Astros Dome?
Oh, Dave, that's a great question.
Yeah, that was not a perfect performance at all. And it was a rare, I think it's referred to as a rare misstep in Stevie's career.
I think Chris Layton said it was the only time he had seen that happen.
Well, no, but almost. Because at the very end of Stevie's drug problems, he was, you know, exhibiting the ravages of abuse. But it was one of the only times. There weren't that many. How well Stevie could play. You know, he said, it's the only person I've ever seen you wake him up out of a 3-day speed crash and just get him upright and put his guitar on him, and he's like ripping it up like everything's fine.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, I don't know whether it was Whipper or who said it. They said like, you know, maybe Stevie shouldn't have stayed up for 3 days. You know.
Yeah.
Before he had to go play the Star Spangled Banner, which he
True.
decided to play, you know, using a slide.
And
Yeah.
no gain at all. Like it was the clean. It was
Yeah, it was bad, and people were unhappy. But he did meet Mickey Mantle, who signed the back of number 1.
That's right.
Oh, how cool!
Yeah.
How cool!
That's right.
Well, fellas,
Yeah.
thank you.
And on behalf of me and Ty, thank you so much for doing this with us, Andy. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you.
Maybe
It's a really
we can
pleasure.
do a part 2 sometime when you have some time. You know, somewhere down the road, maybe we can do a part 2. That'd be great.
If there's anything left to talk about.
We always have stuff to talk about. Ty, thank you so much again. Every week coming through and being a great co-host and a wonderful friend. I appreciate that.
Yes,
Appreciate
Ty,
you.
great to meet you, man.
Appreciate you,
Wonderful
Dave.
to talk to you. Thanks,
Andy,
thanks
such
for
an
the kind
inspiration.
words. Thanks for the
Yeah.
kind words about the book. It's very much appreciated.
No problem.
It's great. And for those of you in the chat, Andy's got a lot of these kind of things. Here's 2 with Stevie Ray on it. The instruction's fantastic. The playing's fantastic.
They should go to my TrueFire channel. I have an instructional channel on the TrueFire.com website called Total Guitar Masterclass. So you can take lessons with me through the masterclass. And there's tons of videos in a library up there that you would have access to, along with something like 35,000 other videos in TrueFire's vault when you sign up for online courses. Or if anyone's interested in just a Skype lesson or a Zoom lesson, you know, they could contact me on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram. I'm doing a lot of teaching that way. And then I have 2 CDs, Put a Sock in It, Long Song Records in Italy, reissued it, remastered it, so you could get it from Apple Music, or you could get it from Long Song Records. And I have another record called Live at North Star. And then there's the Stevie book, too. So I encourage anybody out there, if you'd like, just drop me a line, and it would be great to talk to you.
Yeah.
It's great. And Ed, this is coming your way, Ed.
Yeah, Ed Dana. Okay, Andy, stick with us for 1 second while I do the ending of the show, and we'll see you all next Thursday night. Have
Thank
a good
you
night,
all.
everybody.
Yeah, thank you.